Cool. Okay, I'm going to start, share my screen with my little starting slide.
Give me a few seconds.
Yes, okay.
Welcome everybody to our next industry guest talk. Hello, Kim. So today our guest is Kim Richard. Kim, because I studied film and cinema for my master's, I've been on set for productions. I really appreciate the people who come from the film industry into the world of visual effects because they bring a lot of knowledge from that, and you are one of them. So Kim has been in film and industry, so you have been involved in multiple positions, and then now you are head of mocap department, motion capture department at Weta. And you're bringing a lot of those experiences into this world and building teams for feature film and television productions. So we can't wait to hear your talk for today. So welcome to our little industry guest talk.
Thank you for having me. So yeah, I don't know if it'll be, I don't know if what I prepared will be quite what you're after, but I'll give it a crack. I know that, you know, obviously the stories of the people who come in more through the artist and technical pathways are probably of more direct interest to you. I was thinking that from the benefit of my experience in recruiting as well as department management and contracts management, that in the visual effects and animation industries, it might be the things that I can share with you that might be.
These are fantastic.
Yeah, will be sort of around those. So this can be a pretty general kind of a talk, and time for questions at the end. Although if, you know, like, I don't have any objection if you've got a burning question that you want to ask, I don't mind being interrupted. It's all pretty free flowing. So I am the motion capture department manager. Actually not the head of motion capture. I'm not lofty. The head of motion capture is Dejan Momcilovic. You can look him up on LinkedIn. So he would be a fascinating person to talk to you all. But as Hussein said, I started my career in the live action industry. Took a bit of breaking into the live action industry. Worked in kind of multiple roles for a period of probably, I want to say, like 7 to 10 years. And then I was fortunate enough to transition into the visual effects industry, initially in recruiting, and I recruited for a number of years. I have recruited for pretty much every department at every level. So I think that's probably the most interesting thing for you all as you're kind of contemplating how you're going to break into the industry and what those first steps are going to look like. So I've tried to kind of formulate a few things to consider. So I might just share my screen.
Yes.
And I'm just going to show you through a few of the projects that have come through motion capture in the last, I've been here for 5 years. So a few of the projects that we've had coming through the department. Sorry, I'll just go to play. So I started in 2018. And pretty big transition to me into motion capture because it's a very technical department. We have a mocap stage here in Wellington, and we also deploy teams to shoots around the world, and we have a significant tracking team, motion capture tracking team, which deals with the data that comes off the stage. data that we've acquired on shoots, and also from time to time data from third-party vendors on, other vendors working on shoots around the world. So it's been quite the journey for me getting my head around the technicalities of mocap, but I think as it said in the intro, the great thing about this role for me is that it brings together my experience in live action with my experience in the visual effects industry, and that's been a fantastic opportunity to kind of draw the threads of my career together. So I wanted to sort of give you some kind of insight. Obviously, my career path is going to be different to what you all will have because you're coming primarily from artist spaces. But I wanted to sort of show you what the journey kind of looked like for me, just to kind of give you some sort of overview of, or some sort of context for what a career can look like. So this blue section on the side here with these little icons are showing you everything that I did before I broke into the live action industry. So I worked in all sorts of roles. I did a ton of waitressing, and I did house cleaning, and I worked in a warehouse with a lot of other, some kind of unemployed artists and people trying to get their start in various roles, to the point where my family and even my friends were starting to question my life choices quite strongly. But eventually I managed to get a job in the live action industry, and I worked as an accounts assistant. And then I stayed in the industry, as I said, for sort of like 7 to 10 years. And I moved through production accounting. I did some production work. I did a variety of roles. And I guess the most important role that I ended up in was art department management. And that served me very well. It kind of, again, as the role that I'm in now, it kind of drew together the threads of a lot of experience, and so I could kind of bring that to the role, which was pretty cool. Then I moved into recruitment, as I said, crew management, and I've ended up as the motion capture department manager. So the size of the tiles also kind of represents the length of time. So when I broke it down and looked at it, it's kind of like you do all these different things, study included, and that's generally kind of for a relatively short period of time, even though it feels like it's an eternity to get you to where you're actually doing what you want to do. And then as your career progresses, it's kind of like, you start to hone in on one thing that's that probably forms the basis of your career. For many people, they might have a career change, 2 or 3 times, and I think that's increasingly the case. But generally, the start of your journey, when you're a student and when you're trying to break into industries, you just do what you have to do. And so that brings me to my next point. So I wanted to kind of hit a few fundamentals for everyone so that you can maybe tuck them away and remember them when you need to. So referring back to my journey into that previous slide, I think people get really hung up on the idea that their resume has to reflect the industry. Like if you want to work in visual effects or animation, that your CV must only have things that relate to, to that path that you want to take. I don't think that's the case. I think that all your experience is relevant. You know, people, a whole person gets hired. So things like all your experience is relevant, especially all your work experience. The fact that you've learned to work is important. Any, you know, the interests you have, if you did any volunteer work, anything like that, it all forms a picture of a person. And, you know, companies and individuals aren't hiring people just based on skills. Like, they're not just looking for that skill. Of course, it's really important, your skills and experience, but who you are as a whole person is really important too. So it's kind of good to remember that you need to own your story. That's all you have to do.
Beautiful.
And so I'm racing through this, so I hope you've got plenty of questions. So a little bit on show reels, portfolios, and resumes from my experience. So show reels, I'm sure you get told this and told, less is more, and focus on quality. You can get hired on a one-shot show reel. It just has to be good enough. So think about that when you're making choices about what you put on your reels. You want to focus on your strengths. You want to showcase the disciplines that you're interested in working in, and where your strengths and interests lie. You want to put only your best work. If you need to be able to stand back and look objectively at your reel and not be afraid to remove things. I mean, hopefully you've got to end up with something, but think about the choices that you're making in your show reels, and think that, you know, work that isn't your best work, it'll pad the show reel out, but it'll actually detract from the really good stuff. So maybe just think about the really good stuff and make that the focus. Yes, and then portfolios. Oh, by the way, I can't see if anyone's raising their hand, so if anybody wants to jump in, just start talking and I'll stop.
Yeah, anybody who wants to, like, you know, feel free. This is like as previous talks, this is like a chill pace talk. So if you have any question in the interim, just raise your hand. I pass on the mic to you to answer. Online people, feel free to open your mic and ask question, or leave your question, you know, text it in the text box, and I will read it for Kim.
Yeah. Actually, that might be an appropriate place to stop. Does anyone have any questions at this stage, or anything you'd like me to elaborate
any question on so far? What's your first slide was so inspiring. Just, I really loved how you opened it up and talking about all the journey you had. It was so, you know, I loved it. But just saying that, and like how you opened it, like that people, companies hire people, not resume. This is a very human approach, and I really appreciate this, like, you know, conveying to us this point of view.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, that was kind of my intention. I mean, I think, you know, the reason when I was trying to break into live action, the reason that I did so much waitressing and house cleaning was because I couldn't commit to a full-time job, because I had to be available to work on things like commercials that might only last like 2 or 3 days, maybe sometimes 1 day. But if I wasn't available, then they would go to the next person. And so in order to make myself available, I chose jobs where I could, where I could be rostered on, rostered off, where I could juggle things around. And it was incredibly stressful, and sometimes just kind of making enough money to pay my rent and things like that. So I just wanted to, I guess it was nice to have an opportunity to share that with people, to remind myself of how I did actually struggle. Yeah, so, and not to feel, I think I've been in industry talks before where people have said, nobody wants to hear about your job at McDonald's. Well, we want to hear about that. We want to hear that people understand how to work, and you do what you need to do. You show up, you do your job as well as you can, whatever job it is, and that kind of means something, and it pays off further down the track. And you needn't be ashamed of earning money. That's what we all have to do. So yeah, okay, so show reels, portfolios. So depending on your discipline, some of you will also submit a portfolio. I would suggest, portfolios are, in this industry, are kind of additional to the show reel. So you should only be adding a portfolio if it's showcasing something, if it's adding something, it's informing the show reel, it's showing your artistic skill, but it's got to be adding something. If it's not adding something, you don't need to do a portfolio, just stick with the show reel. Same rules apply as for show reels. Only put your best work in there, and be very objective about it. I guess also sometimes people get very attached to things that they've worked really hard on, and you have to remember that the people who are viewing it, they can't see the hard work, they can only see the result. So if the result of something that you didn't really have to work that hard on, that just flowed and everything worked, if that result's better, well, obviously show that, because you may not get an opportunity to explain how hard you worked on something if it doesn't actually look that good. So you think of, perhaps reflect on that. And then resumes, just reiterating what I've been saying, your resume is a vehicle to tell your story, and you just need to own your story and tell it to the best of your ability. I think people also get very hung up on everything looking professional and, and the format and everything. I think really it doesn't matter. Just choose something that, obviously something that's really readable, that makes sense. Maybe don't put too much in your resume, too much text, because just remembering that recruiters and hiring managers are really busy people, so they're scanning. So you want them to scan and extract the information that you want them to. Actually, while I think of that too, most candidate management systems work on keyword searches. So you want to get those keywords in your resume. You want to think about the things that a recruiter might be searching for and make sure that you've got those kind of peppered in there. A lot of that's to do with softwares and disciplines. So, if they're looking for an animator, they're going to be looking for Maya and maybe an experience level. So,
What about like while we are here? What about like online documentation or portfolios? Our students, third-year students, they document their like capstone project process. So so they reflect week by week on the process of what they go through, and they make brilliant outcomes. But like the documentation shows the progress. Do you think such an online like kind of blog, which you scroll through in one glance and have a look at how this person has evolved in the last year of studies, would be something of interest?
Yeah, I think so. I think you work backwards from the finished product, though, you know. So, so again, it's what ends up on screen.
Yes.
It's the same for everyone who makes, you know, who creates for the screen industry. It's the same for the companies. It's what ends up on screen. And so if the finished product is interesting enough, then you know, then people will probably dig in and spend some time. And it's not like recruiters and hiring managers aren't spending time and, you know, and kind of going through things thoroughly, but you want to help that process. So yeah, but definitely, is that sort of where is that available? Like, what's the format?
So it's actually the way that you said, like the latest week is the highest one. So like, so we see the final result, and then as you scroll down, you see like through the entire year, last year. So you see the week by week how this project has been evolved. Each student, they made a blog on a either like their website on a public weblog platform like WordPress. So and these links, so third years make that, so to be able in future to make use of this, like this documentation, to showcase that they are not only able to make beautiful stuff, but also think and reflect on it.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable. And it's actually really valuable I think it's always good to kind of reflect on your journey as well. And I think if you don't note that down somewhere, if you're not actually plotting it, it can kind of be hard to remember. So I think that's really valuable from a personal level as well, but definitely very interesting. And, you know, it depends on the nature of the role you're going for and things, and whoever's doing the recruiting, you know, what they you know, where their interest level is, you know, how deep they'll go into that information. But I certainly, that sounds really fascinating. So yeah, I think that's a great thing.
Great. Sorry for interruption.
No, jump in any old time. So then I also just wanted to make this point, because some of these things are very sort of like one statement here. But I wanted to make this point because I think that can be tremendously daunting for people. You can feel, especially in a big company like Weta, you can feel like the recruiters are some sort of guard at the gate that's stopping you getting in, and that you somehow have to kind of succeed in getting past. And I just kind of wanted to, if any of you was sort of had that in your head, I kind of wanted to dispel that myth, because I think the opposite is true. From many years in recruitment and knowing lots of recruiters at other companies, or, you know, here at Weta and at other companies, and people who've been recruiting for decades, they genuinely want you to do well. Like, they want you to succeed. Part of that is because when you do well, you make a recruiter's job easy. And so it's not like they don't want you to get in, you know, and they don't want you to succeed. Limitations can be around the number of roles available, you know, the level that you come in at, maybe not quite matched with what they're looking for. Can be sometimes they just need people who are, you know, are really skilled in one particular discipline or one particular software, and there's no time to train. Could be like a short project or something. All these limitations, but the limitations not coming from recruiters. You know, recruiters actually, most of the recruiters I know, they love working with hiring for the entry level roles, because people who are trying to break into the industry are usually really enthusiastic, and they just want that first chance, and it's so rewarding to be able to give people that opportunity. So I just wanted to take a moment to make that point for you. And that leads me on to a bit of a confusing slide. I had gone with a cake analogy, but then I switched to vehicles. But bear with me and I'll talk you through it.
These are super cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I started with the cakes, and then I just got a little bit confused with my own cleverness, and so I reverted to this. So basically, in this industry, I can kind of sense three distinct groups in terms of types of companies and styles of work. So this first slide here, this first picture here with these two little dudes in their go-kart, this is intended to represent smaller companies who do maybe, you know, television or commercial work, or some of the kind of mobile platform games and things. I chose this image because I think that you're in a really unique situation when you're a student, and you have this opportunity to touch every aspect of a project. I know you do group projects as well as your own individual projects. So you have this tremendous opportunity to be given a brief, but within that brief to be able to do pretty much everything in it, or at least a really large chunk of it. And I think that's what you get. That's the benefit from working at smaller studios. You get to do more. It's more of a generalist, you know, it's an entry point as a generalist, and largely you will get to do a lot of stuff. And depending on the nature of the studio, you might end up like actually biting off way more than you can chew, because that's what they need you to do. That's the kind of paradigm for that company. So if you go in as an animator, or, you know, like a generalist with a but largely doing animation, but you can model, well, pretty soon you're modeling. You've done some rigging, and you end up doing rigging as well, and, you know, they just keep adding things. But that's great, because you're getting to work on a whole variety of disciplines and grow that generalist skill set. And then the next picture is this. I chose the Formula One car. I think this is the 2022 official FIA car. Not 100% sure, but anyway, this is kind of meant to reflect the bigger studios. I'm not actually saying that you know, that the work is inherently more valuable. I'm just saying it's more complex. So you may find yourself being the person who paints the yellow, or the person who you know, screws in the wheel thingies, the bolts into the wheels. I'm really extending my knowledge of cars here. But that's what it can feel like. You go from being able to touch so much of things, being able to have some influence on the final product, to actually just doing one small thing in this very very expensive, very complex vehicle. And that can actually be a bit disheartening, because it can turn into a bit of a grind. You've got all this advantage of being, you get your first credit on a really big movie, but you're actually spending your time doing a very small portion of this larger scale project. I guess, I just wanted to talk about this a little bit, because it's probably not too early to start thinking about what you want your career to look like. Not like you can't transition between the different styles of companies and the different projects, but you kind of need to know what you're getting yourself into, from the outset. And then I put this third picture. I have no idea what I'm looking at here. I actually I think I searched for crazy vehicle. This came up. I don't know what it is, but this is intended to represent going your own way. So this is also an option, you can create your own content, and then you can make whatever the hell you like, whatever way you want to make it. I used to speak a few years ago when I was at Animal Logic. I used to speak to students doing a very similar talk to this at one of the other institutions. And I used to help sort of go through show reels with people and just kind of talk through them. And most of the time, people were really, at least pretended to be interested in what I had to say. But I hit this one guy, and he was like really almost hostile. And, everything I said, he was like quite combative, and he wasn't interested in kind of schmoozing me. He wasn't interested in impressing me or kind of getting me interested in him. He was actually quite hostile. And so we spent sort of about 20 minutes together, really hard work. And towards the end of it, I just said to him, look, I don't think you're cut out to work in a company at all. I think you might be one of the few people who, maybe, dare I say it, like Peter Jackson, who you should just make your own stuff and see where you end up, because you could keep yourself pure, do your own thing. If you're not interested in making product for other people, then do the really bold thing and do your own thing. So I wanted to present that as an option, because I think also in this, in the climate we're in, there's such a demand for content. There's such hunger for content that, maybe that's more of a viable option than it ever has been in the past, and increasingly so. So, yeah, that's
Beautiful.
that little point. Yeah. So, also wanted to talk about the balance of kind of aspects of production as a whole. So most of you, I'm imagining, fall into the artistic kind of camp. I'm sure that you touch on production as well as part of your group projects. Is somebody doing?
We do. We actually do briefly, and from year 1 to year 2 and 3, we do a bit of talking about planning, Gantt charts, organizing, and sort of like this type of initial introduction to the production values.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, I guess I'm just making the point. So one of the questions, here you go. If you ever interview with us, that I'm giving you the inside scoop on this. One of my go-to questions is, do you consider yourself to be more artistic or more technical? So there's no right answer to that, but I think that having a balance of artistic and technical skills is always useful. And that can also depend on the strength of your skill. So if you're hugely artistic, now it really doesn't matter if you're not that technical. If you're pretty artistic, then it's good to be pretty technical as well. And then production informs everything. So when you work in a company, it doesn't matter what size company it is, having some understanding of production is going to be really beneficial to you, because it helps you to understand the context. So you're thinking about schedules, about the time that you've got to complete a task, and you're thinking about it in the context of why it's important, because, you know, many tasks add up to a schedule, and then a schedule has obviously a delivery date. Each department has a date that they need to deliver by. They have kind of a series of milestones and then a kind of hard end date where everything's got to be finished. And the more that you can be mindful of that, and the more that you can work with the production team, especially in a big company, the better you're going to go, and the more it's going to help you. So don't neglect the production aspect. If you feel that you're sort of weak in one area, maybe spend a bit of time getting a little bit more familiar, or upskilling in the case of the technical, upskilling, particularly in softwares, and then artistic. I mean, you can never exercise your creative muscles enough. So, just do whatever makes you happy in the artistic space, and just keep kind of returning to those and building those core skills. Right, which leads me to, this is getting into some dull stuff here, but hard work does make a difference. I put a little qualifier down here saying most of the time, unless you're really lucky or in the 2%. I'd say the 2% are those people who are just so phenomenally talented that they seem to just sail through everything and it doesn't seem like effort to them. But those people are so rare. I'd say 2% is probably generous. For the rest,
is it still high? Is
yeah,
it still
yeah,
very high? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. For the rest of us, hard work. You never go wrong. Just pushing yourself and just trying your hardest. I say most of the time, and I don't want to be, I want the theme of this conversation to be encouraging, but just accept that sometimes you'll work really, really hard and nothing will come of it, or you won't get that promotion, or you won't get that next job. That's okay. Take it on the chin, keep working hard, and the next time, and this sounds really trite, I know people say this all the time, but just get back in the ring and keep pushing, because if you don't keep pushing yourself and you don't work hard, then you can pretty much guarantee that you won't succeed, you know, or at least at the very best you'll just drift. So it takes, everything in life takes a bit of effort, and it's worth remembering. So these things apply, you know, no matter what, you know, what stage of your career you're at. So I just wanted to note down a few little helpful things. So remember, the first one, you know, what's your objective? Why did you start this in the first place? When you're completely lost and you can't break into the industry and it's just a big drag, or you're stuck in a job and you're not moving, and the opportunities aren't coming your way, you know, I think it's good to reflect back on why did you start this? Like, why did you choose this instead of working in a bank, you know, or, you know, I know I'm trying to think of some other job that would be much easier. You know, you probably chose it because it was interesting and exciting to you, and you know, it was an environment that you wanted to be in. So think about that, and, you know, let that keep driving you forward, because you kind of, in a way, I mean, it's probably easier these days in this industry because there is so much more content, and there are a lot of opportunities. They may not be the ones you want, but you know, may not always be the ones you want. You might end up working on some stuff that you're like, why am I doing this? But, you know, one thing leads to another. And if you hadn't made this bold choice, well, you would be doing something dull, and maybe you would be not very, you know, you wouldn't be happy and you wouldn't be fulfilled. And then that's also kind of returning to the theme of the opening slide. It's kind of like, think about where you are in the context of a whole career. So just think, you know, like, I'm doing this now. Right now it doesn't make sense to me, or it's deeply boring, or I'm stuck. This is just a moment in time. You know, everything changes all the time. So it will shift. It might shift worse, but it'll probably shift better, especially if you're putting in the effort. So just think about it and think, you know, in 20 years' time, I'm going to look back on this and, you know, I may not even remember, or I'll think, yeah, that was right before that amazing thing happened, you know, and that's something that you can draw on to kind of push yourself forward, which is really the next point. I had put creativity needs to be fed, but then I was kind of like, it's sort of inspiration and motivation needs to be fed. To keep yourself moving forward, you need to be feeding yourself. So that might be going to the movies. It might be like playing a new game, or returning to a game that you used to love that you haven't played in ages and remembering why you loved it. It could be reading books. It could be walking in nature. It could be going out or cooking some really delicious dish. Just keep your to keep your spirit moving forward, you need to feed it. Hussein's going to love this one. Do not neglect the fundamentals.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, never neglect the fundamentals. There's fundamental rules that apply to to the screen, to design, to fashion. This slide is actually an appalling example of neglecting fundamentals, but we'll let that go. You can always return to the fundamentals. You can always get them stronger. You you can understand the principles of design, you can understand how a story is constructed, you can understand, shots and framing, you can always know more. So that's something you can always return to, and you should never neglect. I think I was really fascinated. I went to an Andy Warhol exhibition here in Wellington, and people, because Andy Warhol had this very commercial approach to everything, and people said anyone could do his work. And at one point, I think he actually didn't even do his own paintings. He thought that was a big joke to him. He had other people doing his paintings. And he was very open about that. And so he's really kind of interesting character. But the most fascinating thing in that exhibition was looking at his sketches from fashion. He'd started as a fashion illustrator. And you could see, even like, I don't have any formal art training, but you could see so clearly just what a skilled artist he was because of the
he's very solid in drawing.
Incredibly solid, so confident with a single line, and that is not something that happens by accident. That's something that that's something that's been nurtured. He's a classic example, probably the same as Picasso or Jackson Pollock or somebody like that. So they could break the rules because they knew the rules so well. So you can't skip that step. And you may not want to believe it, but it is true. And then I guess that sort of lands on the final point, which is invest in yourself, which is kind of taking in all of the above. Take the time to pause and invest in your own journey, whatever that looks like. Okay, and I think this is pretty much my last slide before.
Amazing, yeah. Beautiful.
Before question time.
Yeah.
This is deeply boring, but I'm going to cover these off really quickly. I actually asked people here. I asked some of the people in the tracking team, and I'm kind of like, why would these people be interested in listening to what I've got to say? And they were like kind of nice and indulgent with me. But I sort of said, if you were talking to students, or if you were thinking back to some of the industry talks you had, what would you wish that people had told you? And the first thing everyone said was tax. So early days, but spend a little bit of time and remember this, like, as you're entering the industry, take the time to understand what you need to do to look after yourself from a tax perspective. And I guess that is kind of, your overall finances, because you can really get yourself in some trouble not understanding that you need to pay tax, and you don't want the government coming after you for the money that you owe them. So there's tax, and there's your broader financial situation. Deeply boring, deeply boring, but really important. Health. You have chosen a pretty sedentary kind of industry to work in. If you think about what you're doing, what you'll be doing for the course of your working life, you will be sitting in a room, depending what your discipline is. If you end up in compositing, you'll be sitting in a dark room for many hours, sitting, standing, but you'll be inside. So I think it's really useful to start to think about that consciously now, and take steps to kind of manage yourself, figure out your diet, figure out getting some exercise, Figure out your sleep. That's going to be a big one. A lot of time on a screen. I mean, we all spend so much time on screens. Don't neglect those things, because they'll have an impact on your career, because they'll have an impact on, you know, your overall happiness and also your ability to do your job. So it's if you only care about progressing your career, you have to care about your health, you know? And it has the benefit of making you feel better as well. So do what you need to do to take care of yourselves. And then very last point, communication. Work on your communication skills. For some people, it's really easy. For some people, it's more of a challenge. I think we live in an environment now, you know, having been through COVID and with increased awareness around, you know, things like neurodiversity, we live in a much more forgiving environment than we have in the past in a lot of respects. However, you need to communicate with people. And in the workplace, you know, this includes, you know, verbal and written communication. You need to get comfortable expressing yourself. You need to get comfortable giving and receiving feedback, and all of this takes practice. If you don't practice it, if you progressively do less and less of it, keeping your camera turned off, not interacting, not asking questions, it actually gets harder and harder. So you got to, for those of you who don't find it easy, you know, if it's not an easy thing, and appreciating that some of these work environments and things like interviews obviously can be hugely intimidating, all you can do is just like keep practicing, just keep kind of exercising that a little bit, push yourself a tiny bit, open up a little bit more, you know, take a few risks, ask questions, you know, put yourself in different environments and practice those skills, because they'll make a difference to you, and they'll make your work life and just your general life easier. But it does take a bit of time. Wow, I have talked and talked.
And you talked very beautifully. The one that you said boring, I think was the most fascinating slide.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kim. It was insightful and very wise. My colleague Miriam says, Kim, your talk is so warm, knowledgeable, and refreshing. I'm one of the AVG lecturers and really appreciate your very holistic and human perspective. Anyone else have some questions? Raise your hand so I pass this on. All good. Oh, there's one online. We have 15 people online. Grace asks, for showreels, what if you did a group work that you have been working on? Can you still use that in your showreel, and does it have to be individual? Or I don't know if that makes sense. So her question is, like, what if I work with few other people on one shot? How I represent it in my showreel?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's totally fine. I think I didn't actually cover shot lists, but this is probably good to lead into that. Yeah, I think you just need to be very clear about what it is that you did in the group project. So put that in the shot list. And actually, I think group projects are great because it gives you an opportunity to explain what your role was and, you know, how that progressed. And if you think about a group project as basically, you know, like a film production is a group project, it's just on a massive scale. So a group project can be, you know, it can be, it's sort of an illustration of how you work in a team, and that's one of the most one of the most fundamental things that we're looking for. When we're hiring, we're looking for people who can work in a team environment and who can kind of contribute and enjoy working. So yeah, it's a good vehicle to tell that story.
We recommend our students to subtitle their contributions. So they say on this shot I have worked on modeling and texturing. You have a question here?
Hi, good to talk to you. So my question is, what do you think are the advantages of a woman in this industry?
Advantages?
Of a woman, yeah. Thank you.
Of being a woman?
A female, yeah.
Wow, that's an interesting question.
Thank you.
Industry's changed. The industry's changed a lot. If I'm to be completely honest, there weren't many advantages to being a woman when I started in this industry. I think that I would say as an artist, it's probably a different perspective. I'm cautious to get too gendered in that, because that's kind of getting into dangerous territory as well. But I think trying to think of advantages of being a woman as opposed to disadvantages, I'm going to make a gendered generalization here at the risk of getting myself in trouble. I find generally women tend to be more considered. So the downside to that is women tend to be more cautious and take less risks. And I see that. I know it's a gender stereotype, but I see it all the time. So, for example, a man and woman of a similar age, again, I'm being gendered here, but the guy he'll look at a job ad and he'll go, there's 5 things, they've got 5 criteria, I've got one of them, I'll have a shot, I'll have a try. Whereas women tend to go, there's 5 criteria here, I've only got 4 of them, this sort of thing. But the good side of that is when you're looking at when they're approaching work, women tend to be careful and considered and thorough, not all the time, but and so they're kind of they're not overconfident, and that sort of overconfidence is great because that's kind of, in a way, that's sort of fast and getting through things and stuff. I feel terrible making these generalizations, but
they make sense. Yeah, they make sense because the industry is reshaping. When I started 25 years ago, it was a very masculine industry. Yeah. Now we see like top management like you and a lot of artists and technicians and mathematicians and programmers, and so like we see a shift towards a more diverse inclusion of all genders, man, woman, and others into the industry, which is fascinating. But still, we're not there. We're not there.
And I don't think I don't know what you all think, but I don't think we're really there with the stories yet either.
Yes.
Because it's kind of like the stories, a lot of the projects, especially in film, to me, they feel kind of maybe leaning more towards a masculine thing. And also, when you get into areas like effects and lighting,
but I think
the great thing is from our hiring, we're definitely achieving a much better balance these days, and it's also really refreshing to see a lot more women coming in with a really good, solid technical foundation. So that's pretty cool too. Yeah, and I'm really interested in gaming. Actually, just cuts across everyone. You know, like that doesn't seem to me quite as gendered in some ways. Yeah,
true.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for asking that question. We have another one.
Hello. Just
Hi.
going back to the show reels. If you were a rigging artist and you didn't do much of the animating in one of your projects, can you still show how the rig worked with someone else's animation? Like, can you say, I rigged this and this is how it looked?
Yeah, just make it clear in the shot list.
Okay.
You know, just be very, very clear about what you did. And to be honest, rigging reels are some of the most boring reels I've ever, it's because, you know, I'm not very technical. I have no idea what I'm looking at, and I'm just kind of like, this is so boring. So yeah, I think that's fine, but just be very clear always be very clear. Don't leave any ambiguity. Also, I mean, you know, you want that just generally because, you know, like recruiters might be talking to the same people, and if you've been unclear about, especially if you've been in a group project or, you know, you've worked on something together, if you've been unclear about what your role is, and then they talk to the other person, and it's kind of like, you know, what did you do? So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Time for last question. Anyone? Okay, thank you so much. It was an amazing talk, and I'm sure everyone enjoyed. Let's have a big round of applause for Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and have an amazing rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.